Hey, what is up guys, I'm Exteria, and in this video, we're going to be talking about what is new in Teamfight Tactics of set 15, from the gimmick itself to the new unique unit, and also the class system that they introduced for set 15. You guys might be wondering about that last part I just said, about the different classes, and basically what it is, for any unit that you want to check their details on, you just right click them to see what they are. For Syndra's case, she's a magic caster. This means that she gains mana for every time she attacks, and she also gains mana regen, which is a brand new stat in TFT. I'll explain more about it later, but let's talk about the different classes. Like for example, Sivir, she is an attack caster, which is the exact same stat as Syndra. The only difference is one unit's AD, the other one's AP, but essentially it's the same stat. And we have like some unique ones. For example, KO, she is a magic specialist, which is just their own unique resources because she doesn't use mana. But the more basic things, like for example, Garen, he is basically an attack tank, meaning he's AD tank. He gains mana for every time he attacks. He also gains mana from getting hit, and he is more likely to be targeted. If you want to see an AP version of that, is basically the exact same thing, which is Kennen, which is a magic tank. Same exact thing that Garen does as an attack tank. But if we're going to talk about close range carries, like for example Neferi, she is completely different. She's an attack fighter. This means that she gains mana for every time she attacks, and she also gains Omnivamp. These stats can change over time. This is just what we know for now. And speaking of stats, there's also a +1 stat we can see here now, which is how much damage your basic auto attacks are doing, which is kind of nice to see. But for the most part, everything I just explained just now doesn't really change your gameplay. It's just if you want to know more in depth of what your unit does. Now, going back to the mana regen I was talking about earlier, it's a new stat in TFT with most tier items. Now for blue buff, for example, you don't gain like a refresh or like +10 mana that you can gain back. Now what blue buff is, you gain mana regen instead. So this item is actually pretty good overall, even for high mana cost units, like say for example, like a 70 cost mana like Karma. It's still pretty good to have blue buff on her, or you could build Shojin on her, which is basically the same thing as it was before, and you gain 5 mana for every time you attack, and you also gain +1 mana regen per second. And there's also Archangel Staff too that also gives you 1 mana per second back, but it still does the same thing as well, where you gain ability power for every 5 seconds in combat. So most of these items are kind of the same, but the unique one I would say is Adaptive Helm, because before Adaptive Helm was depending on your position on the front to back line, but now it's just depending on your class. So if you're a tank or a fighter class, you gain armor magic resist. If not, then you gain attack damage and ability power instead if you're different roles. And the main thing about Adaptive Helm is you gain 15% mana regen from all sources. So this means that if you put double Adaptive Helm on, then it's going to be 15% more of that +2, which is 4. If you have 2 Adaptive Helm, then you get +2 on top of that. So it means that you'll get +6 mana regen. If it works like that, I could be wrong, but I'm just assuming. And if you want to know how much mana regen you're getting, you can click on the unit, and then for example Ezreal is only getting 2 mana per second, but if I slam blue buff on him, then he will gain even more, 7 mana per second. Now that since we're already here, let's just talk about the gimmick. You see this fruit thing in front of me? You just pick it up and it will give you a fruit, and basically what this is a power snack, and you put it on any unit you want to give them extra stats. Technically it's like giving them an anomaly. So I'm gonna put it on Ezreal, and I can choose either one of these. If you want to know more in detail of what each of these does, you just click the full view right here, and it tells you exactly what you get. But for the most part, I like to put it on simple, just because I know what most of these does already. And then when we see this gameplay video here, you may notice about this red fruit that you see here in my inventory. This one is basically the remover for the fruit, or basically your power up. And essentially, if you don't like what you have, you can just easily just keep spamming it on the same unit, or you can transfer it to a different unit. Either one's fine. But you can, as you see here in this clip, I just pop it out to see what I can get because I didn't like what I had before. I just pick one I want, and I actually didn't like this one either. So I just do it again and to see what I can get on the next one. So basically, you're just re-rolling your power up to see what you can get. And you can also sell the unit to get the fruit again. Another gimmick in set 15 is basically turning a trait into prismatic. As you see here, I have 8 out of 10 Star Guardian, but it's still not prismatic. And the reason why is because you have to do like a secret quest in order to make it into a prismatic, which basically upgrades to make it already stronger than it already is. As you see here, I don't know why is this high. I actually didn't cash this out at stage 6-5, which is insane to me, but they might change it over time. As of right now, is you have to spend 20,000 mana while playing 8 Star Guardian in order to activate this as Star Guardian units in order to cash this out into a prismatic synergy. There are easier ones currently, which is the Battle Academia trait. In order to turn this one prismatic, you just have to have a lot of items on the board. Apparently it's 17, but from what I'm seeing is basically around 12. I guess these gloves count as 3 full items towards that 17 full items. So maybe it works like that. I don't know if it's supposed to be like that or not. But essentially, when you turn Battle Academia into Prismatic, you basically just one-shot the whole board, as we see here in this clip. Like, I just get destroyed so quick because how strong this synergy is currently in the PvE. And just like that, I lost pretty hard. Before I talk about the new synergies, they actually did a pretty cool animation where if you hit top 4, you know you hit top 4 with this animation. So it's pretty cool. Because I'm too lazy to get footage of these new traits and new units, I'm just going to explain to you, at least the unique ones, on how to use these certain traits and units. Because if I stay here and explain to you what Bastion is, we all know what it is. It's just armor and magic resist. There's no need for me to explain this. For unique 1 cost, there really isn't much, but I would say Gnar, funny enough, he's a sniper. He's not a tank, so he's a backline unit. So most people might think that he's a tank, but no, he's a backline unit. And same thing of Lucian. Lucian is actually a magic damage character. He's not a physical damage, so just remember these 2 things for at least the 1 cost ones. There's not really much 2 cost to talk about, but I would say the unique one would be Janna, because she is actually a protector. Even though she's a backline unit, she's also a tank synergy, and she's also a strategist, which is also a pretty good synergy as well. So if you do play Janna, just put her in the back, don't put her in the front. Unless the meta calls for it, but for the most part, just put her in the back. For 3 cost units, the unique one I would say is Jace is a frontline unit, so technically he's like a bruiser, not a backline unit. And a really interesting one is Lulu, because Lulu could transform into different units. And the unit she could transform into is either one of these 3 units, which is either Rammus, or she can transform into a Kog'Maw, or she can transform into a Smolder. What makes this unique is that you can either need a tank, or you can need an AP backline, or you can need an AD backline. So depending on what you want, you just choose it to turn into that. All you have to do is just throw it on the board, and then the selector will be in your shop to choose which one you want. The unique 4 cost we're going to be talking about here is Cassante, and the reason why he's pretty unique is because this unit has 2 lives. If he doesn't die yet, and he casts his first ability, he's able to just gain durability and do a certain amount of damage based off certain armor and magic resist. But if he dies, he goes all out like he does in League, where he just ulties and just destroys everything. So he has 2 different actives that he can use on his base one or on his all-out version. These next units are kind of unique just because their abilities don't exist in League. Like for example, Rise, he basically does a Kamehameha, which is basically just like a laser that single targets a person, and that single target also does splash damage. And for Karma's case, she throws out like a spinning top or like a Beyblade that does damage over time to units that is tracking down. So it's basically like a homing missile that does damage over time and spins on them. Basically about it. Every other 4 cost units does what you think they do. Now onto the unique 5 cost units. The funny thing about this unit, he's not a tank. Braum, for every set, has always been a tank, but this one, he's not. Even though he is a Bastion, which is a tank trait, his ability executes. So just think of him as like Renekton from last set, where you just build bruiser items on him, like BT, Bloodthirster, their XQSS, because if you put tank items on him, he's not going to be as effective as he is with damage items. Another unique one that's like basically Sona from set 10, where he could change different forms, is Lee Sin, and the different forms he take is also a trait or a synergy that he could become as well. Those synergies he could become is basically like a duelist like Kai'Sa, where he just gains attack speed, and his ability allows him just to keep punching a lot with Omnivamp. The other synergy he could become is like Set, Juggernaut, where it's just a lot of defense stat, and his ability for this version is a big punch, where it's AoE and does a lot of damage. And the last trait he could become is an Executioner like Akali, where basically it sounds like what it is. He just goes around executing units within a certain amount of range. He'll just kill them. So Lee Sin could become these 3 different traits: Duelist, Executioner, or he could become a Juggernaut. Either one with different types of abilities that he does. The last unique unit I'm going to be talking about here is basically Zyra, just because she summons basically a totem that you can use and it helps you fight. That's basically about it. The rest of the 5 cost units basically just does a lot of damage. Like Varus, even though his ability doesn't exist in League, he just shoots a lot of barrages of arrows that does a lot of damage. Or Seraphine, she just throws out like a bomb that does a lot of damage. Or TF just throws out a lot of cars that does a lot of damage. Or Gwen throws out a lot of needles that does a lot of damage. Essentially, the other 5 cost units that I didn't explain just does damage basically. Now, to speedrun the unique traits of this current set, there's no point to explain traits like the crew. It's just a reroll synergy, so there's no point explaining this. Or stuff like Bastion, which is just defense. Same with Protectors. It's just defense. So we're going to go for the more unique ones to explain. For example, like Mecha, which is actually pretty cool, the Mighty Mecha. If you have 3 units on the board like Lucian, Aatrox, and GP, you summon a big Galio on the board, and you can use this Galio to help you fight, and you could pretty much win streak all of stage 2 because it's a +1 unit. And Lucian is a pretty strong AP carry as well, with Aatrox being an okay tank. As you see here, the opener is actually pretty split. You can do whatever you want. You can put an extra sword for Lucian to do damage, or you can put any tanks like Juggernaut or Heavyweight for Aatrox because he's both of those synergies. So it's pretty good overall. The more mechs you throw in, which is basically 3, 5 to 7, the stronger the mech unit becomes, which is basically this golem you see here. And the mech stat also reflects on what level your units are. So if you have all level 2s, then the mech is even stronger. Or if you have some level 2s and mostly level 1s, then the mech is a lot weaker. So you have to start up most of your units. Of the current time to get the Prismatic Mighty Mecha, you have to get 3 augments that reflects Mighty Mecha. If you don't, you cannot get the Prismatic version of it. And in order to do that, it has to be technically all 3 gold augments, and somehow there is more than 3 mecha augments, so try to look for them, and you basically get Exodia. Pretty cool synergy would be Luchadors, which is consisting of Gnar, a Mundo, a Volibear, and a Braum. And remember I said earlier, Braum is not a tank, he's basically a bruiser. And Gnar is not a frontline unit, he is a backline unit. So this is where each of the hexes are placed for the units. These units are 1 hex and this unit is 4 hex. What Luchador is basically if they are below 50% health, they cleanse every negative effect, meaning they don't get stunned anymore or they don't gain anti-heal or burn or anything like that. They take it all away and they jump on a unit, knocking them up within a 1 hex radius. So you basically have an AoE stun and you just go ham on whoever you jump on. Basically about it. It's a pretty cool synergy overall to me. Next interesting one is Supreme Cells, which consists of Kennen, a Kaisa, a Darius, and an Akali. And same thing like the Luchadors, Kaisa is the only backline unit, the rest are all frontline units. This trait is basically whoever is the strongest from last round, they gain bonus stats for the next round. So it's basically like they're the chosen one and they just do a lot of damage. If you max out your Supreme Cell, then you're able to get 2 Supreme Cell units. But for the most part, I've never seen anyone play 4 just because they don't synergize at all with each other whatsoever. It's mostly just 2 or 3 for fun. If not, they go back to 2. Basically about it for this synergy. The next unique one is Star Guardian, and Star Guardian is not like how it was previously at all from all the other generations. Star Guardian consists of Rel, Xayah, Syndra, Ahri, Nico, Jinx, Poppy, and a Seraphine. And to classify them, this side would be AP, this side is AD, and these are basically tanks. What makes this synergy unique, even though we have 2 ADs units on the board, the thing about this board is it's mostly an AP heavy board. The reason why is because Star Guardian is basically like the Vinicorp from last set, where you're able to get stats for the rest of your Star Guardian units. So say for example you throw out Rel to gain shield, the whole Star Guardian board gains a shield. And then Syndra, she grants ability power to your whole board. Xayah, which is an interesting one because she's a physical damage unit, she gives all the Star Guardians every 3rd attack they deal magic damage, and it scales over time. For Ahri's case, it's actually really OP. She gains more mana over time every time she casts, and the rest of the units also gain that power up as well. Nico is actually pretty OP as well, gaining more healing and more shielding effectiveness. For Poppy, you heal up to a certain amount of health if you lose a certain amount of health. So basically, it's like the second wind augment. And then Jinx, we gain a lot of attack speed for the board. And then Seraphine, you just gain all the stats. So she's basically an Infinity Force. If you have Emblem, then the Emblem will increase all the Star Guardian stats by 12%. And in order to get the Prismatic version, which is what I never got because it's too expensive for whatever reason, you have to spend at least 20,000 mana and have at least 8 Star Guardian units to start that. So you can't start with only 2 Star Guardian to stack the 20,000 mana. It doesn't work like that. You need to have 8 Star Guardians units on the board, then you can start stacking for that 20,000 mana. For sure, they're gonna buff it where it's gonna cost less, because apparently back in the day, I don't know why, it used to be 8,000, which is way cheaper to do, but as of the current time, it's 20,000, and for sure, they will change it. Another synergy that can get prismatic as well would be Academy with Ezreal, Garen, Katarina, Rakan, Caitlyn, Jace, Leona, and Yuumi. So all these units are frontline units. Katarina is basically a frontline bruiser that's AP. Rakan is just straight up tank. Garen is an AD bruiser, same with Jace. And Leona is your main tank most of the time. For the backline units, Ezreal is going to be your early game carry, and he's hybrid. So you can build him AP or AD. It doesn't matter which one because he does both damage. So it's pretty good. This means that you can play either into a Caitlyn carry, which is AD backline, or a Yuumi, which is AP backline. So Ezreal is really good for that in-between, whichever one you want to play. And what Academy is basically like AMP from last set. So the more you have, the more damage you'll do overall. And if you have at least 17 completed items for your board, the Academy units gain 10 more basically amp to their stat, and they'll just one-shot everything. So if you want to win the game, just have a lot of item augments, force this comp, GG. Another unique synergy, which is basically like a throwback, is like from Emissary on set 13, and in this set is basically called Mentor. And Mentor consists of having Kubuko, and Udyr, a Yasuo, and a Rise. You may notice that if I take out the Rise, it's not active. The main reason why is because you need to play at least 1 or 4. If you don't play the exact number of 1 and 4, this trait cannot be active. The difference between 1 and 4 does work differently. So if you have 1 mentor in, then that means your whole board gain the stat of whatever they provide. But if you play 4 mentors, then all the mentors gain bonus stats of what each one gives, but it's only on the mentors afterwards. It's not on anyone else. So you could choose to either play mentor as like a sub trait, so you have extra stats on your board, or you could play it as a main trait and play it as the main carries. Either one is up to you. The last trait I'm going to be talking about here in full detail is Wraith, and Wraith is pretty unique because of 2 reasons. One, KO is unique herself. Depending on what level you are is depending on how she evolves. So level 1 through 5, she just does regular base magic damage. And on top of that, at level 6, for every 3rd auto attack, she shoots out like a wave that does AoE damage and shreds magic resist. At level 9, she basically launches wave after wave every time and it hits across the map. So this is a recycled KO. They've done this before and it's actually pretty strong and pretty cool. And other units that is Wraith with KO would be Zac as a tank, Jhin also has a backline damage with KO, but Jhin is a physical damage backline carry, Malzahar, which is an AP backline, a Cassante, which is also another tank, and lastly a Varus, which is an AD backline unit. So as you see here, the synergies, we have 2 snipers because of Varus and Jhin, and the rest don't synergize whatsoever together. But what's cool about this trait is that the amount of damage you put out on the board, the synergy itself will also deal an additional damage to 3 closest enemies, and whichever Wraith unit is low, it will heal 18% of the damage that the Wraith did. That's basically about it. It's just extra damage for the synergy. And yes, the trait doesn't sound too strong, but the thing about it is, all these units are actually really great. As of right now, currently, Jhin is like the weakest, but the rest is actually really strong. Now to speedrun the rest of the traits, besides the basic ones like Duelist, which is attack speed, and then, you know, Protectors and Bastions just for tank. The Econ trait, which is basically Heartsteel from set 10, consists of having a Syndra, a Janna, a Vi, a Swain, an Ashe, and Zyra. So these 3 units are AP down here. These units are frontline units, and Ashe is the only AD backline unit. Essentially, how this synergy works is if you have 7, you basically win the game. But essentially, it's exactly like Heartsteel, where every 4 player combat, you choose to cash out the reward that you gain from stacks over time for each round, or you can double down, meaning you can get more stacks for every time you lose. But the issue is, if you win for doubling down, then you lose 50% of your stacks and you just cash out right away. So it's exactly like Heartsteel. Other than that, that's basically about it for this comp. Another trait, which is basically Street Demon from last set, which is Kalista, Neferi, Zenzao, Lux, Viego, Samira, and set with Gwen. Gwen is a 2 hex, everyone else is 1 hex up here, everyone else is down here is a 4 hex, and Lux is the only AP backline unit. Gwen is an AP 2 hex unit, and the rest of these units are basically tanks. Besides Viego. Viego is more like a bruiser AP, so you kind of want to play him in the second row so he can fight, so he doesn't die as easy. But the rest of these units are basically tanks, and it's exactly like Street Demon, where it's just stats over time. But the thing about this, if you want to play for the prismatic version, you need to do at least 99 player damage total after you activate a Soul Fighter. And I actually haven't done this yet because honestly the units itself are kind of weak at the moment in the PvE, so it's kind of hard to cash this out. But if they do buff it, it's going to be very strong later down the line. And that is it for basically everything you need to know of the premise of set 15. If you have any questions about this set, I could answer to the best of my capabilities in the comment section down below. Until then, I'll see you guys on the next one. Later.